The laughter came first. Not loud, not cruel, just a kind of tired, hollow sound that escapes men who've been walking through waist-deep snow for 11 hours and need something, anything, to break the silence. Staff Sergeant Lena Carter didn't look up. She was seated against the rock wall beneath the overhang, her pack wedged behind her lower back, her legs stretched out toward the small chemical heat source glowing orange at her feet. The cold had seeped into her bones 6 hours ago. She'd stopped noticing around hour 8. Now, at hour 11, she was simply part of it. In her hands, resting across her thighs like something sacred, was a rifle, 15 years old, bolt action, manual scope with adjustment turrets that clicked with the kind of mechanical certainty that digital systems couldn't replicate. The stock was worn smooth in places where her cheek had pressed against it 1,000 times. The trigger had a pull weight she'd memorized in her sleep. And beneath the fore end, barely visible unless you knew where to look, was a name etched into the metal by hand. Grace. Specialist Rook was the first to say something. He was 23, fresh off his second deployment, and carrying one of the new standard-issue marksman rifles with digital range readouts, warm grips, modular rails, and an adjustable stock that could be configured 17 different ways. His scope had a battery-powered reticle that auto-adjusted for windage. His trigger had been tuned by engineers in a climate control facility in Maryland. Hey, Carter. His voice was light, joking. That thing belonged in a museum, or what? A few of the others chuckled. Walsh, the team senior scout, was the loudest. He was sitting across the overhang, his own rifle prop beside him, his gloves off so he could rewrap the tape on his left hand. Seriously, Carter, Command's been pushing the new platform for 2 years. You still running that antique? Lena didn't respond. She pulled the bolt back a 1/4 inch, checked the chamber by feel, then slid it forward again. The action was smooth, silent. The cold hadn't touched it. You know the new optics have thermal overlay, right? That was Rook again. He was grinning now, emboldened by the audience. You can see through fog, through snow, through battery death? Lena's voice was flat, unhurried. She didn't look at him. Rook blinked. Walsh snorted. Captain Mark Keller, who had been studying the map spread across his knees at the far end of the overhang, glanced up briefly. His eyes moved from Lena to Rook, then back to the map. He said nothing. If that opening hooked you, trust me, this story only gets more intense. Subscribe now for more real stories of courage and resilience, and hit that notification bell. Now, let me take you back to where this all began and show you what Staff Sergeant Lena Carter was really carrying through that frozen hell. The mission had started 18 hours ago. A UH-60 Blackhawk operating out of FOB Northwind had gone down in a sealed valley approximately 14 kilometers northeast of their current position. The crew, 3 souls, had sent a distress signal before the radio cut out. Weather analysis gave them a window of 31 hours before the storm system currently hovering over the eastern ridge would collapse into the valley and make extraction impossible. Keller had been given 10 personnel. For scouts, 2 medics, 1 communications specialist, 1 heavy weapons operator, 1 logistics NCO. And Lena, she wasn't supposed to be on this mission. 2 weeks earlier, Command had issued a directive requiring all designated marksmen to transition to the new M1-10A2 platform. The order had been unambiguous. The justification had been equipment standardization, supply chain efficiency, and improved performance metrics in controlled testing environments. Lena had refused. She'd stood in Captain Keller's office, a plywood box barely large enough for a desk and 2 chairs, and told him, without raising her voice, that she would not carry a rifle that depended on batteries to function in an environment where batteries died. It's not a request, Carter. I understand, sir. Command wants uniformity. If your optic fails, supply can replace it with any unit in the theater. If your optic fails, he gestured toward the rifle case she brought with her, we're pulling parts from a gunsmith's estate sale. Lena had said nothing. Keller had leaned back. He was 42, 3 combat deployments. He'd seen enough to know when a soldier was being stubborn and when a soldier was being right. You're telling me that rifle will function in -40? It's functioned in -43, sir. February 2019. Karengal follow-up. I made a shot at 612 meters in a crosswind that would have crashed the M110's rangefinder. And the optic? Manual adjustment. No batteries. No thermal. No auto compensation. Just glass, metal, and arithmetic. Keller had studied her for a long moment. Then he'd exhaled. One mission, Carter. After this, you're transitioning. I don't care if you have to learn to love it. Understood, sir. That had been 14 days ago. Now, under the overhang, with the temperature dropping toward -20 and the snow falling in sheets beyond the rock ceiling, Lena sat with a rifle across her knees and listened to her teammates laugh. Rook was still going. I'm just saying, if we make contact out here, I won't know my glasses in a fog because I breathe too hard. It's called discipline, Lena said. You hold your breath when you're on the scope. Yeah, well, I like having options. Options are for people who can't make decisions. Walsh chuckled again, but this time there was something sharper in it. Something that wanted to push back. You know what I like about the new rifle, Carter? Walsh's voice had an edge now. It's built for the 21st century, not for some sniper romanticism about the old ways. Lena's fingers paused on the bolt. She'd known Walsh for 2 years. He was competent, experienced. He'd been awarded a Bronze Star after an ambush outside Kandahar, where he dragged a wounded sergeant 400 meters under fire. He was also the kind of man who measured himself against everyone around him and didn't like it when the measurement came up short. The old ways, Lena repeated. You mean the ones that still work? I mean the ones that don't account for modern threat profiles. Enemy combatants with thermal detection, drone coordination, electronic countermeasures. You think your bolt action is going to survive a battlefield where everything's networked. I think my bolt action is going to fire when I pull the trigger. Can you say the same about your battery-powered scope in a -30 blizzard? Walsh opened his mouth. Captain Keller's voice cut through the overhang like a blade. Enough. Both of them went silent. Keller didn't look up from his map. His finger was tracing a line along a terrain feature, a narrow wind-funneled corridor between 2 ridges that led to the crash site. His voice was calm, tired, the kind of tired that came from carrying the weight of 10 lives through terrain that wanted them dead. We move again in 90 minutes. Everyone gets 40 minutes of sleep, then we rotate watch. I don't want to hear about rifles, about equipment, about who's got the better glass. I want to hear silence. The overhang went quiet. Lena adjusted her position against the rock, pulled her pack tighter behind her, and closed her eyes. But she didn't sleep. She never slept well before movement. Instead, she let her mind drift backward, to the last time she'd been in snow this deep, to the last time the rifle had been this cold, to the face she tried not to see in her dreams. Grace Harlow, Specialist Grace Harlow, had been 24 years old when she died. She'd been Lena's spotter for 3 years, the longest partnership Lena had ever had. They'd worked together in the mountains of Afghanistan, the deserts of Syria, and the frozen ridgelines of Norway during a joint exercise that had gone sideways when a blizzard buried their observation post under 4 feet of snow. Grace had been small, quick. She'd had a gift for reading wind, something Lena had never seen in another spotter before or since. She'd known instinctively when the air was about to shift, when the gusts were about to change direction, when the moment between breaths was the moment to fire. And Lena had ignored her once. One time, they'd been in position on a ridgeline in the Hindu Kush, watching a compound where an HVT was expected to appear. The wind had been steady for an hour, a consistent 12-knot crosswind from the east. Lena had dialed in her adjustment, settled behind the scope, and waited. Grace had said, "Wind's about to shift." Lena hadn't believed her. The target had appeared. Lena had fired. The round had gone wide by 3 inches. It had struck Grace in the shoulder. The bullet had torn through her trapezius, exited below her collarbone, and buried itself in the frozen dirt behind her. Grace had made no sound. She'd simply looked down at the blood spreading across her jacket, then looked back at Lena with an expression that wasn't anger, wasn't fear. It was understanding. "I told you," Grace had whispered. They'd evacuated her. She'd survived. She'd healed. And then for months later, she died anyway. Different mission, different mountain, a wideout in the Karengal that came without warning and swallowed their position in a wall of white. Lena had been 50 meters away when the snow shelf collapsed. She'd heard Grace scream once and then silence. They'd found her body 2 days later. Lena had carried the rifle ever since. Not because it was the best rifle. Not because Command couldn't have issued her something newer. But because Grace had etched her name into the metal of the night before she died. "So you don't forget me," Grace had said. "So you remember to listen." Lena remembered. Every time she pulled the trigger, she remembered. Every time the bolt slid forward, she remembered. Every time a teammate laughed at the antique she carried, she remembered. She opened her eyes. The snow was still falling. The chemical heat source had dimmed to a pale orange. Rook and Walsh had gone quiet, their breathing slow and steady. Captain Keller was still awake, his eyes moving between the map and the darkness beyond the overhang. Lena checked her watch. 23 minutes until the next rotation. She settled back, let her breathing slow, and waited. The rifle lay across her knees, cold and patient. Grace would have hated this weather. Grace would have been complaining about the MREs, about the cold, about the way Walsh talked too much. She would have been sketching wind patterns in the snow with a stick, muttering calculations under her breath, and occasionally looking over at Lena with that expression that meant, "I know something you don't." But Grace was gone, and Lena was here, and somewhere out there, in a valley that was slowly being buried under a mountain of snow, 3 people were waiting to be saved. She closed her eyes again. This time, she didn't see Grace's face. She saw the valley. 40 minutes later, Captain Keller called them together. The overhang had become a command post. Maps spread across a flat rock. Chemical lights positioned at the corners to provide just enough illumination to read the terrain contours. The snow had eased slightly, but the wind had picked up, driving ice crystals sideways through the air like tiny blades. 10 bodies crowded into the space. Steam rose from breath. Feet shuffled to maintain circulation. Keller spoke without preamble. "Listen up. Here's what we know." His finger traced a map. Black Hawk Tail number 643 went down approximately 14 hours ago. Crew of 3. Pilot Chief Warrant Officer Martinez, Co-Pilot Warrant Officer Chin, and Crew Chief Specialist Rivera. Last transmission indicated mechanical failure. Possible rotor ice buildup. Followed by controlled descent into this valley. His finger tapped a depression between 2 ridge lines. They landed here. Or crashed here. We don't know which. Distress beacon activated for approximately 11 minutes before signal was lost. Weather may have killed the signal. Damage may have killed the signal. We don't know. What's the terrain? That was Sergeant Briggs, the heavy weapons operator. He was built like a refrigerator and had a voice to match. Sealed valley. Ridge lines on both sides, approximately 300 meters high. Valley floor is roughly 800 meters wide, 2 kilometers long. Only access is through this corridor. Keller's finger traced a narrow gap between the ridges, which funnels wind from the northwest. Expect gusts up to 60 knots at the choke point. Walsh leaned forward. Enemy presence? Unknown. Last intel sweep was 72 hours ago. No confirmed hostile activity in the AO at that time. But this region has seen sporadic insurgent movement over the past 6 months. We're treating this as a contested environment until we confirm otherwise. Lena studied the map without speaking. Her eyes traced the contour lines, calculating distances, estimating time. The corridor was roughly 4 kilometers long. In good conditions, they could cover that in 2 hours. In this weather, on snowshoes, carrying full packs and rescue gear, 4 hours. Maybe 5. Timeline, Keller continued. Weather window closes in approximately 19 hours. After that, the storm system currently holding over the eastern ridge will collapse into the valley. Visibility will drop to 0. Extraction will be impossible. We have to be at the crash site, crew secured, and ready for evac before that window closes. What's the extraction plan? That was Corporal Diaz, one of the medics. She was small, dark-haired, and had hands that moved with surgical precision. QRF is holding at FOB Northwind with 2 birds. Once we confirm survivors and secure the site, we radio coordinates. Flight time is approximately 18 minutes, but they won't launch in 0 visibility, So if we're not out before the storm hits, we're spending the night in that valley. The silence that followed was heavy. Spending the night in a sealed valley in -40 temperatures with limited supplies and possible enemy presence wasn't a survival scenario. It was a body recovery scenario. Questions? Keller asked. Rules of engagement? Walsh's voice was tight. Standard. Return fire only if engaged. Minimize exposure. We're here to extract those crews, not start a firefight. And if we're ambushed, Keller's jaw tightened. Then we break contact, regroup, and continue the mission. Those 3 people in that valley don't have anyone else coming for them. We are their only option. He looked around the group, making eye contact with each of them in turn. This is a rescue mission. Everything else is secondary. We move fast, we move quiet, and we bring them home. Clear. Clear, sir. Keller rolled the map, tucked it into his chest rig, and stood. We step off in 15 minutes. Final equipment check. Rope lines between pairs. I don't want anyone getting separated in the white. Bearing checks every 15 minutes. Radio silence unless contact is made. The group dispersed. Lena remained where she was, seated against a rock, the rifle still across her knees. She watched her teammates move through their final preparations, tightening straps, checking chambers, adjusting the fit of their snowshoes. Rook was having trouble with his scope. He was holding the new rifle up, peering through the optic, frowning. His breath was fogging the lens, and he kept wiping it with his sleeve, which only made it worse. Damn thing keeps fogging, he muttered. Walsh glanced over. Use the anti-fog wipe. Should be in your kit. I did. Still fogging. Then stop breathing on it. I'm not breathing on it. It's the temperature differential. The manual said it was rated for -20, but Lena said nothing. She ran her fingers along the scope of her own rifle. Manual adjustment, no batteries, no thermal overlay, no anti-fog coating. Just glass, metal, and 15 years of trust. The scope was cold. Clear. Ready? Captain Keller appeared beside her. You good, Carter? She looked up. His face was lined with fatigue, but his eyes were sharp. I'm good, sir. He hesitated. Then quietly, I know what you're carrying. I know why you carry it. Lena didn't respond. Just stay focused. This isn't a Karengal. This isn't a repeat. I know, sir. He studied her for a moment longer, then nodded and moved away. Lena closed her eyes. She didn't need him to tell her what this wasn't. She knew exactly what it was. It was a mission. It was a job. It was 3 people in a frozen valley who needed someone to come get them. That was all. Grace was gone. Grace wasn't coming back. And no amount of guilt, no amount of carrying this rifle, no amount of perfect shots in perfect conditions would change that. But she could still do this. She could still be useful. She could still make sure that when the moment came, when the cold reached its deepest point and the gear started failing, she would be ready. She opened her eyes and stood. The snow had stopped. The column moved in pairs. Rope lines stretched between each duo, 30-foot lengths of paracord that would go taut if one person fell or lost their footing. The idea was simple. In a wide-out, visual contact could disappear in seconds. The rope kept you connected, kept you accountable, kept you from dying alone. Lena was paired with Corporal Diaz. Diaz was quiet, professional. She didn't ask about the rifle, didn't make jokes, didn't fill the silence with chatter. She moved with the kind of deliberate efficiency that came from years of operating in environments where every calorie mattered. They walked in silence for the first hour. The terrain was brutal. The snow had packed into drifts that ranged from knee-deep to chest-high. The snowshoes helped, spreading their weight across a larger surface area, but they didn't eliminate the effort required to push through. Every step was a negotiation with gravity, with cold, with the mountain itself. Lena felt the fatigue settling into her shoulders, her lower back, her thighs. She'd been on missions like this before. She knew the rhythm. You didn't fight the exhaustion. You absorbed it. You let it become part of you, like the cold, like the silence, like the weight of the rifle on your back. Ahead of her, Walsh was moving with Sergeant Briggs. Behind her, Rook was paired with Private Harmon, one of the younger scouts. The column stretched out in a loose line, each pair separated by roughly 20 meters, close enough to maintain visual contact, far enough to avoid bunching up in an ambush. Captain Keller was at the front with Sergeant Torres, the communications specialist. His job was navigation, keeping them on course through terrain that all looked the same. White trees, white ground, white sky, an infinite canvas of nothing. Every 15 minutes, he stopped, checked his compass, and made a small adjustment. At the 90-minute mark, Lena noticed they were drifting. The wind had been pushing them, subtle but consistent, off the corridor line. She could feel it in the angle of the slope, the way the drifts were building on one side of her body more than the other. They were a few degrees off course. Not much, maybe enough to matter. She didn't say anything. Not yet. She watched Captain Keller instead. Watched him stop, check his compass, frown slightly, then make the correction himself. Good. He'd caught it. The column adjusted. They pushed on. At the 2-hour mark, they reached the entrance to the wind corridor. It was exactly as the map had described. A narrow gap between two ridgelines, no more than 100 meters wide at its narrowest point. The wind funneled through it like water through a pipe, accelerating to speeds that made standing upright a challenge. Keller held up a fist. The column stopped. Tighten up. His voice was barely audible over the wind. We're going through in one group. No separation. Move fast. Stay low. Keep the person ahead of you in sight. They compressed. 10 bodies, shoulder to shoulder, ropes shortened to 15 feet. Then they moved. The corridor was 300 meters long. It felt like 300 kilometers. The wind hit them from the side, driving ice into exposed skin, trying to knock them off their feet. Lena leaned into it, lowering her center of gravity, keeping her eyes fixed on Diaz's back. The world narrowed to a tunnel of white. Nothing but the shape ahead of her, the rope in her hands, and the steady rhythm of her snowshoes biting into the packed snow. Behind her, she heard someone stumble. A curse, a grunt. The rope between Rook and Harmon went taut for a moment, then released. They kept moving. The corridor ended as suddenly as it began. The wind dropped. The ridgelines pulled back. And suddenly they were in a different landscape, a forest of snow-covered pines that stretched toward a valley floor hidden somewhere in the white. Keller called a halt. 10 minutes, he said. Check your gear. Check your teammates. Then we pushed to the valley floor. Lena found a tree to lean against and allowed herself to breathe. Her hands were numb inside her gloves. Her face was raw from the wind. The rifle on her back felt like it weighed twice what it had when they started. But she was still moving. She looked over at Rook. He was hunched against a tree, fumbling with his rifle. The scope was fogging again. He was trying to wipe it clear with a cloth that was already frozen stiff. Problem? Walsh asked, appearing beside him. Scope's useless. I can't see anything through it. Walsh frowned. Switch to your backup optic. I don't have a backup. The new kit only comes with the primary. Walsh stared at him. You're telling me you got one optic on a mission where we might make contact? Command said the new scope was rated for extreme cold. They said, Command said a lot of things. Walsh's voice was sharp. None of them are going to help you if you can't see your target. Lena said nothing. She pulled her own rifle from her shoulder, checked the scope, clear, cold, functional, and resecured it. Grace's name caught the faint light for a moment. Then it was gone. Diaz appeared beside her. How's the dinosaur holding up? Lena looked at her. Diaz's expression was unreadable, but there was something in her eyes that might have been curiosity or respect. Still breathing, Lena said. Diaz nodded. Good. I have a feeling we're going to need it. They made the valley floor by hour 4. The descent had been treacherous. A 45-degree slope covered in loose snow that could become an avalanche with one wrong step. They'd move single file, testing each footfall, using their poles as anchors. 2 hours to cover what should have been a 30-minute walk. But they were down. The valley stretched ahead of them, a long white corridor framed by ridgelines that rose like walls on either side. The crash helicopter was somewhere at the far end, roughly 2 kilometers northeast. They had 7 hours until the weather window closed. Plenty of time. If nothing went wrong, Captain Keller called for camp. They found a position at the base of a cliff, an overhang similar to the one they'd used earlier, but deeper, better protected from the wind. The cliff face rose 30 meters behind them, creating a natural barrier that would break any attack from that direction. The overhang itself was wide enough to shelter all 10 personnel, while still allowing clear sight lines to the east and west. "We rest here until 0400, Keller announced. 4 hours. Then we push to the crash site at first light. I want 2-person watch rotations, 20 minutes on, 40 minutes off. Everyone else, sleep if you can." The group settled in. Lena took a position against the back wall, her rifle across her knees. She didn't need to sleep. She'd learned long ago how to function on fragments. 20 minutes here, 30 minutes there. The body adapted. The mind adapted. You became something more than human, and less than human at the same time. The first watch was Walsh and Torres. They moved to positions at the edge of the overhang, scanning the tree line with night vision equipment. The snow had stopped again and the sky had cleared slightly, revealing a field of stars that seemed impossibly bright against the black. Lena watched them for a moment, then closed her eyes. She didn't sleep. She listened. The forest had its own rhythm, a pulse of sound that ebbed and flowed with the wind. The creak of branches, the soft thump of snow falling from overloaded limbs, the distant cry of something that might have been a bird or might have been the wind playing tricks. And underneath it all, a silence so profound it felt like a physical presence. Lena had learned to read that silence. Grace had taught her. "The forest tells you everything," Grace had said once, during a long night in the mountains of Norway. "You just have to know how to listen. It's not about hearing sounds. It's about hearing the absence of sounds. When the birds stop singing, something's wrong. When the insects go quiet, something's moving. The forest knows before you do. Your job is to pay attention." Lena paid attention. For the first 2 hours, the forest was calm. The rhythm held. The pulse continued. Then at 0230, something changed. It was subtle, a shift in the pattern that most people wouldn't have noticed. But Lena noticed. The branch sounds from the east had stopped. Not gradually. Suddenly, as if something had moved through that section of the forest and silenced it by its presence. Lena opened her eyes. The camp was quiet. Most of her teammates were asleep, hunched shapes wrapped in thermal blankets, breathing slow and steady. Walsh had been replaced by Rook on watch. Torres had been replaced by Briggs. Lena rose to her feet. Rook noticed her movement. "You're not on rotation for another 40 minutes. "I know." She moved past him, toward the eastern edge of the overhang. "Heard something." "I didn't hear anything." "That's the problem." She reached the edge and stopped, scanning the tree line. The starlight provided just enough illumination to see shapes, dark masses of trees against a slightly lighter background of snow. Nothing moved. Nothing broke the stillness. But the silence was wrong. Lena waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3. Then she heard it. A crack. Distant, deliberate, the sound of a branch being snapped underfoot by someone who didn't care about noise discipline, or who wanted to be heard. She raised her hand and made a fist. Rook saw the signal and went still. Behind them, the camp continued to sleep. Lena strained her ears, filtering out the wind, the creaking trees, the ambient noise of a frozen forest at night. She focused on the east, on the space between the trees, on the darkness that swallowed everything beyond 20 meters. Another sound, a scuff, the drag of something heavy across packed snow, coming from the north. 2 sources, 2 directions. She turned her head slightly and made eye contact with Rook. Then she pointed east, then north. 2 fingers, 2 contacts. Rook's face went pale in the starlight. "You sure?" he whispered. Lena didn't answer. She moved back toward the camp, stepping carefully, keeping her silhouette low. When she reached Captain Keller, she crouched beside him and placed one hand on his shoulder. His eyes opened instantly. "Contact," she said, her voice barely audible. 2 groups, east and north, unknown size, moving deliberate. Keller didn't hesitate. He sat up slowly, his movements controlled, and swept his eyes across the sleeping camp. "Wake them. Quiet." Lena moved. Within 90 seconds, the entire team was awake, weapons in hand, eyes on the tree line. The transition from sleep to combat readiness was seamless, the result of years of training and deployments. Walsh appeared beside Keller. "What V we got?" Carter heard movement. 2 directions. Walsh looked at Lena. His expression was skeptical, but not dismissive. "You sure it wasn't wildlife? This forest is full of—" "It wasn't wildlife." "How do you know?" "Because wildlife doesn't move in coordinated patterns. Whatever's out there, it's human, and it's coming this way." Walsh opened his mouth to respond. A muzzle flash split the darkness. The round cracked past Lena's head and buried itself in the cliff wall behind her. Everything happened at once. Briggs dove left, bringing his M240 to bear on the eastern tree line. Torres dropped flat and scrambled for radio. Diaz threw herself over one of the still-prone team members, covering them with her body. Rook stumbled backward, his rifle coming up, and then the forest erupted. Automatic fire from 2 directions, east and north, exactly where Lena had said. Muzzle flashes bloomed in the darkness like malevolent stars, each one followed by the crack of supersonic rounds tearing through the air above their position. "Contact east. Contact north." Keller's voice cut through the chaos. "Return fire. Suppression only." Briggs opened up with the 240, the heavy weapon roaring as it spewed tracer rounds into the eastern tree line. Walsh and Rook took positions at the north edge of the overhang. Firing control burst into the darkness. Lena didn't fire. She moved. While her teammates engaged a visible threat, she slid along the back wall of the overhang, keeping the cliff face between her and the incoming rounds. Her mind was running calculations, angles of fire, positions of cover, the shape of the battle as it unfolded. The enemy had made a mistake. They'd opened fire too early. If they'd waited another hour, waited until the unit was on the move toward the crash site, they could have caught them in the open, in the valley floor, with nowhere to hide. Instead, they'd engage a prepared position with natural cover and clear fields of fire. Amateur or desperate, either way, it gave them a chance. Lena found a position at the far western edge of the overhang, a slight rise in the ground that provided elevation and a clear view of the northern tree line. She dropped to prone, pulled the rifle from her back, and settled behind the scope. The glass was cold, clear, perfect. She scanned. The enemy was using the trees for cover, firing from behind thick trunks, their muzzle flashes the only indication of their positions. She counted signatures, 3 from the east, 4 from the north, 7 total, maybe more in reserve. The unit was holding. Briggs' suppression fire had slowed the eastern group. Walsh and Rook were keeping the northern group pinned. But this was a stalemate, not a victory. Eventually, ammunition would run low. Eventually, fatigue would set in. Eventually, someone would make a mistake. Lena needed to break the rhythm. She focused on the northern group. Through the scope, she could see the muzzle flashes more clearly now, brief orange blooms that illuminated the shapes behind them for fractions of a second. For shooters, 2 close together near a fallen log, 2 spread out to the right, using individual trees for cover. She waited. 30 seconds passed. A minute. Then she saw it. One of the shooters, the one furthest to the right, shifted position. He moved from behind his tree to a new location 3 meters closer, and as he moved, his silhouette became briefly visible against the snow behind him. He was carrying a radio. Lena's breath caught. A radio man. That changed everything. If the enemy had communications, they could call for reinforcement. They could coordinate a flanking maneuver. They could adjust their tactics based on real-time information. The radio man had to go. Lena made her calculations. Distance, approximately 180 meters. Wind, negligible inside the forest canopy. Temperature, negative 22 degrees Celsius. Elevation, slight decline from her position to the target. She adjusted the scope. 2 clicks left, 1 click down. Her finger found the trigger. The rifle had a pull weight of exactly 3¼ pounds. She'd measured it 1,000 times. She knew when it was about to break. She knew the precise moment between intention and action. She exhaled slowly. Her heart beat once, twice. Between the second and third beat, she squeezed. The rifle kicked against her shoulder, a familiar, intimate sensation. The round crossed the distance in a fraction of a second. She watched through the scope as the radio man silhouette jerked, spun, and dropped. The muzzle flashes from that position stopped. "Target down," she said, her voice flat. Nobody heard her. The firefight was too loud. She worked the bolt, ejected the casing, chambered a new round, scanned for the next target. The Eastern group had noticed something was wrong. Their fire had become erratic, less coordinated, more panicked. They'd lost contact with their radio man. They didn't know what was happening. Good. Lena shifted her aim. Through the scope, she found another target, a shooter near the center of the Eastern group who seemed to be directing the others. Not a radio man this time. Something else. A coordinator. The one giving hand signals, adjusting positions, maintaining discipline. Another priority target. Distance. 207 meters. Wind. Still negligible. Temperature. Unchanged. She made her adjustments. Exhaled. Squeezed. The coordinator dropped. Second target down. The Eastern fire collapsed. Without leadership, the remaining shooters in that group fell into chaos. They started firing wildly, wasting ammunition, exposing themselves. Briggs 240 found one of them, a sustained burst that shredded the tree he was hiding behind and silenced his weapon. The battle was turning, but the northern group was still fighting. Lena shifted her focus. The three remaining shooters to the north had seen what happened to the Eastern group. They weren't stupid. They understood that someone on the American side had reach, could touch them from a distance they couldn't answer. One of them started to run. He broke from cover and sprinted toward a deeper position in the forest, his body low, his movements fast. He was trying to get out of Lena's line of sight, trying to regroup, trying to survive. Lena tracked him through the scope. Running target. Approximately 200 meters. Lateral movement. 10 seconds before he reached cover. This was a hard shot. She led him by 3 body widths. Adjusted for the slight angle of the slope. Exhaled. Squeezed. The round caught him mid-stride. He went down face first in the snow and didn't move. The gunfire stopped. For a long moment, the forest was silent. The kind of silence that follows violence, heavy and absolute. Then, gradually, the sound began to return. The creak of branches. The hiss of wind through the canopy. The distant groan of a tree settling under its load of snow. "Hold fire," Keller said, his voice tight. "Hold fire. Everyone hold." The unit went still. Lena remained in position. Her eye pressed the scope, scanning the tree line for any sign of movement. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was calm. The rifle was warm from the 3 rounds she'd fired. The only warmth she'd felt in hours. "Sound off," Keller called. One by one, the team reported in. Walsh, good. Briggs, good. Torres, a pause. Torres, minor. Got clipped on the arm. Through and through. Still functional. Diaz, good. Rook, good. Harmon, good. Martinez, good. Chun, good. Everyone accounted for. Keller exhaled. Carter, status. 3 targets eliminated. Lena said without looking away from the scope. Radio man, coordinator, flanking shooter. Remaining enemy has broken contact. I don't have visual on any active threats. Any indication of reinforcements? Negative, but they had comms. We have to assume someone knows we're here. Keller absorbed this. Diaz, get Torres patched up. Walsh, Briggs, perimeter check. Don't go beyond 50 meters. The rest of you, gear up. We're moving in 10. The unit sprang into action. Diaz moved to Torres, pulling her trauma kit open. Walsh and Briggs moved toward the tree line, weapons up, clearing the immediate area. The others began gathering gear, tightening straps, checking ammunition. Lena stayed in position. She watched the forest. Rook appeared beside her after a few minutes. His face was pale, his eyes wide. He was breathing too fast. The after effect of adrenaline and fear. He swallowed. That was insane. You dropped 3 of them. Lena didn't respond. I couldn't even see them. My scope was fogged. I was just firing at muzzle flashes. I don't even know if I hit anything. Lena finally looked at him. His new rifle, the one with the digital range readouts and the warm grips, was clutched against his chest. The scope was clouded with condensation. The digital display on the side was flickering, its battery struggling in the cold. "Your rifle," she said. "Is it functional?" Rook looked down at the weapon. I don't know. The scope is still fogged, and the range readout is glitching. It keeps saying I'm at 0 meters. "Can you shoot iron sights?" He hesitated. "I mean, technically, but I haven't practiced in." "Then stay behind me. When we move, you're on my 6. If I go down, you pick up my rifle and you finish what I started. Understand?" Rook stared at her. "Understand," she repeated. "Yes. Yeah, I understand." Lena turned back to the forest. She didn't blame him. The new rifles were designed for a different environment. Controlled conditions, moderate temperatures, supply chains that could replace batteries and swap optics at a moment's notice. They were excellent weapons. In the right circumstances. These were not the right circumstances. Walsh returned from the perimeter, checked with Briggs. His expression was grim. "For bodies," he reported to Keller. 3 with single shots, chest, and upper torso. 1 shredded by the 240. Couldn't get a count on the eastern group, but I saw blood trails heading into the trees. At least 2 wounded, probably 3. Identification? Local insurgent fighters. Mixed kit, ACAMs 1 PCAM. No uniforms. No insignia. But they had night vision, Russian Gen 2 stuff. And that radio Carter took out was a Chinese model. Recent manufacture. Keller processed this. So someone equipped them. Walsh agreed, and someone told them we were coming. Silence. The implication hung in the air like smoke. "We can worry about how they knew later," Keller said finally. "Right now we have a mission. Those 3 people in the valley don't have time for us to investigate a security breach. We move in 5. He turned to face the group. "Listen up. The situation has changed. We are now in a confirmed hostile environment. Enemy combatants have engaged us, and we have to assume they've communicated our position to others. The timeline is the same. We have to reach that crash site and extract those crews before the weather window closes. But we're doing it under threat. That means tighter formation, no stops unless absolutely necessary, and weapons hot until we're on that extraction bird." He looked at Lena. "Carter, you're on point." Walsh's head snapped up. "Sir, you heard me. She's at the only optic that's working reliably. She's our eyes until we reach the valley floor." Walsh opened his mouth to protest, then closed it. Keller continued. "Formation change. Carter on point. I'll be 20 meters behind her. Everyone else, standard dispersion. Walsh, you got rear security. Briggs, keep that 240 ready. Any contact. I want suppression fire within 3 seconds. Yes, sir. We move in 4 minutes. Final checks. No one gets left behind." The unit prepared. Lena rose from her position and secured her rifle across her back. Her hands were still steady. Her heart was still calm. The 3 shots she'd taken were already fading into background, filed away with all the other shots she'd taken in all the other frozen forests in all the other frozen nights. But she allowed herself one moment. She looked down at the rifle, at the name etched into the metal. "Grace, I'm listening," she whispered. Then she started walking. The forest grew denser as they approached the valley floor. Lena moved through it like a ghost, placing each foot with deliberate care, testing the snow before committing her weight, keeping her profile low and her senses extended in all directions. The rifle was no longer on her back. It was in her hands, the scope to her eye every few seconds, scanning the path ahead. Behind her, the unit followed in a loose column. The firefight had changed something in them. The jokes were gone. The skepticism was gone. When Lena held up a fist to signal a halt, everyone stopped instantly. When she pointed out a suspicious depression in the snow that might have been a trap, Walsh moved forward to investigate without being asked. The mockery had been replaced by something else. Not respect, not yet, but attention. The kind of focused awareness that came from watching someone perform under pressure and realizing you've been wrong about them. They reached the valley floor at 0515. The crash site was approximately 1 kilometer ahead, hidden somewhere in the trees. The sun wouldn't rise for another 45 minutes, but the sky to the east had begun to lighten, a pale gray glow that pushed back the absolute darkness. Keller called a brief halt. 15-minute push, he said. Carter, keep us on course. Diaz, how's Torres? Arms holding. Pain managed. He's good to continue. Good. Everyone else, stay sharp. We're almost there. They moved again. The final kilometer was the hardest. The snow was deeper here, accumulated in the valley floor, without the wind to pack it down. Even with snowshoes, they were sinking to mid-thigh with every step. The trees pressed close on either side, creating natural choke points that slowed their progress. And then Lena saw it, the helicopter. It was half buried in snow, its tail rotor shattered, its fuselage tilted at a 40-degree angle against a massive pine. The rotors had carved a path to the canopy before impact, leaving a trail of broken branches that stretched back 200 meters. Visual on the crash site, she reported. Keller moved up beside her. What do you see? One Black Hawk, down and cold. No visible movement. No smoke. No signal. Survivors? Unknown. I need to get closer. Keller considered for a moment, then nodded. Take Rook with you. Everyone else, hold position. Lena moved toward the helicopter, her rifle up, her eyes scanning for any sign of threat. Rook followed 4 meters behind, his useless optic replaced by iron sights that he was struggling to use effectively. They covered 50 meters. 75. 100. Lena stopped at the edge of the clearing the crash had created. Hello, she called. Chief Warrant Officer Martinez? Warrant Officer Chin? This is Staff Sergeant Carter, Rescue Team. Can you hear me? Silence. Then, a sound from inside the helicopter. A groan, the scrape of metal on metal, and a voice. In here. We're in here. Lena moved. She reached the helicopter in seconds, pulling herself up the tilted fuselage until she could see inside the cargo bay. What she found made her heart clench. 3 people. Martinez was conscious, but barely. He was pinned by a section of collapsed ceiling, his legs trapped, his face pale and drawn. Chung was beside him, conscious, one arm hanging at an angle that suggested a dislocated shoulder at minimum. And behind them, wrapped in every piece of thermal gear they'd had available, was Rivera. He wasn't moving. How long? Lena asked. Chen looked up at her with exhausted eyes. 14 hours. Maybe 15. We stopped counting. Are you injured? Shoulders out. Martinez has something broken in his legs. Rivera? She swallowed. Rivera stopped talking around hour 8. We've been keeping him warm, but... Lena keyed her radio. Keller, 3 survivors. 2 ambulatory with assistance. 1 critical hypothermic. We need Diaz up here now. Copy. Diaz, Martinez. Get to Carter's position. Everyone else, establish security perimeter. Within minutes, the rest of the unit had converged on the crash site. Diaz took charge of the medical situation immediately. She assessed Martinez's legs. Compound fracture of the right tibia. Significant blood loss. Shock setting in. She reset Chen's shoulder with a single practice motion that made the warrant officer scream. And she began working on Rivera with grim determination. Core temp is critical, she reported. We need to warm him fast, or we're losing him. How fast? 30 minutes. Maybe less. Keller looked at the sky. The gray glow had spread, and the first hints of gold were beginning to appear on the eastern ridge. They had maybe 2 hours before the weather window closed. Torres, get me that radio. I need extraction now. Torres moved to the communications gear, but when he pulled out the primary radio, his face went pale. Sir, the radio's dead. What? The casing's cracked. Must have taken a round during the firefight. It's not transmitting. Keller's jaw tightened. Backup. Checking. Torres pulled the backup unit from his pack, examined it, and shook his head. Same problem. Different cause. Batteries completely drained. The cold killed it. No radio. No extraction. 2 hours until the storm collapsed into the valley. The situation had just gone from difficult to impossible. There has to be another way, Walsh said. His voice was tight, controlled, but Lena could hear the edge beneath it. Keller was staring at the dead radio in Torres' hands. The helicopter, someone said. Private Harmon, does the Black Hawk still have power? Could we use its comms? Chin shook her head. She was cradling her reset shoulder, her face gray with pain. Electrical system went down on impact. We tried. Everything's dead. What about a signal fire? In a snowstorm? With the clouds sealing this low? They'd never see it. Then we move, Walsh said. We carry them out, same way we came in. Back to the corridor, up the ridge, to a position where we can. That's 4 hours, Keller said. At minimum, in good conditions. We're looking at 5, maybe 6, carrying 3 casualties through waist-deep snow. By the time we reach an extraction point, the storm will have closed in. We'll be stuck on that ridge with no shelter, no cover, and 3 people who need immediate medical attention. Silence. Lena had been watching the conversation without contributing. Her mind was moving to the problem, examining it from different angles, looking for the solution that everyone else had missed. And then she found it. The enemy radio, she said. Everyone turned to look at her. The radio man I dropped, he had a Chinese manufactured radio. Recent model. If it wasn't damaged in the shot, it might still be functional. Keller stared at her. You want to use enemy comms to call in an extraction? It's a radio. It transmits. If we can reach FOB Northwind on any frequency, they can vector the birds to our position. Walsh shook his head. That's 180 meters back through the tree line, in hostile territory, with an unknown number of enemy combatants still in the area. And you want to go retrieve a radio off a body? Yes, that's insane. That's the mission. Keller studied Lena for a long moment. His face was unreadable. She's right, he said finally. It's our only option. Walsh opened his mouth to protest, but Keller cut him off. Carter, you know where the body is. Approximately. Northwest tree line, 180 meters, near a cluster of fallen logs. Take Walsh with you. Move fast, move quiet. If the radio's intact, bring it back. If it's damaged, assess and report. You have 20 minutes. Lena nodded. Understood. Walsh didn't argue. He checked his rifle, still functional, despite the condensation issues, and moved to Lena's side. Let's go, he said. They moved into the forest. The journey back to the engagement zone was tense. Every shadow was a potential threat. Every sound was a potential ambush. Walsh moved 3 meters behind Lena, covering her 6, his eyes scanning the tree line with a focus that hadn't been there 12 hours ago. They found the body at the edge of a shallow depression, half buried in snow that had drifted over it since the firefight. The radio man was young, maybe 22, 23. His face was frozen in an expression of surprise. The round had entered his chest and exited through his back, punching through the radio strapped across his body. Lena knelt beside him. Radio's hit, Walsh said, his voice flat. Lena examined the damage. The bullet had torn through the side of the casing, destroying the display and cracking the internal circuitry. But the transmitter module, the actual component that sent signals, was on the opposite side of the unit. It might still work, she said. Partial function. Enough to send a burst transmission. Might. It's all we have. She pulled the radio free from the body, examined it more closely, then keyed the transmit button. A burst of static emerged from the speaker. Distorted, broken, but present. There's something, she said. Let's move. They made it back to the crash site in 12 minutes. Torres took the damaged radio with the expression of a surgeon examining a patient on the edge of death. He pulled a multi-tool from his vest and began probing the internal components, testing connections, bypassing damaged circuits. I can maybe get 1 transmission out of this, he said. Maybe. The power cell is intact, but the frequency modulator is damaged. I'll have to send blind broadcasts on every frequency simultaneously and hope someone's listening. Do it, Keller said. Torres worked for 3 minutes. Then he held up the radio and keyed the transmit. FOB Northwind, FOB Northwind. This is Rescue Element Alpha. How copy? We are at grid coordinates November Delta 4723, requesting immediate extraction. 3 casualties, 1 critical. Weather window closing. Acknowledge. Static. He transmitted again. More static. Then, breaking through the interference, a voice. Rescue Element Alpha. This is Northwind Actual. We read you broken but present. Confirm grid coordinates. Torres exhaled. Northwind Actual. Confirming grid November Delta 4723. 3 casualties, 1 critical hypothermic. Request immediate extraction. A pause. Then, Rescue Element Alpha, copy all. 2 birds are spinning up now. ETA your position, 20 minutes. Mark your location with smoke or light. Northwind out. The radio died, but it had been enough. Keller looked at his team, exhausted, frozen, wounded, but alive. Prep for extraction, he said. 20 minutes. The helicopters appeared over the eastern ridge at 0622. Tooch! 60 Blackhawks, their rotors catching the first rays of sunrise, descending through gray sky like angels in olive drab. The sound of their engines rolled across the valley floor, the most beautiful sound Lena had heard in 15 hours. The unit had prepped the extraction site with practice efficiency. A landing zone had been stamped flat in the snow. Chemical markers had been deployed to guide the pilots in. Martinez, Chun, and Rivera had been transferred to improvised litters, assembled from poles and straps pulled from their packs. Rivera was still unconscious, but breathing. Diaz had managed to stabilize his core temperature enough to give him a fighting chance. The first helicopter touched down. Crew chiefs leaped out, moving with the controlled urgency of people who understood that every second mattered. They took the litters, loaded the casualties, and began the process of strapping them in for flight. Everyone on the second bird, Keller ordered, move. Now. The unit piled aboard. Lena was the last one on. She settled into a seat near the rear of the cargo bay, her back against the bulkhead, her rifle across her knees. The rotors spun up, the helicopter lifted off, and suddenly they were rising, up through the valley, up through the morning light, up into a sky that was already beginning to darken with the approaching storm. Below them, the forest disappeared into white. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, without looking at her, Captain Keller reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a fresh magazine. He held out toward Lena, a silent gesture, hand extended, no words attached. She looked at it. A standard 7.62 by 51 millimeters magazine. 10 rounds. Compatible with her rifle. She took it. Their eyes met for just a moment. Then Keller nodded once, a small movement, barely perceptible, and looked away. Nothing else needed to be said. Across the cargo bay, Walsh had his head back against the bulkhead, his eyes closed. His jaw was tight. His hands were clasped in his lap. He hadn't said anything since they boarded, not to her, not to anyone. But during the extraction, when they'd been moving through the tree line, he'd shifted his position without being asked, covering her flank, putting himself between her and the direction of greatest threat. He'd done it silently, automatically, the way you did it when you trusted someone. Rook was beside him. His new rifle was still clutched in his hands, but he'd stopped trying to clear the scope. It didn't matter now. They were out. They were safe. The mission was complete. He looked at Lena, and for a moment, she thought he might say something. An apology, maybe, an acknowledgement, something. But he didn't speak. Instead, he simply leaned forward, reached out, and picked up her spare pack, the one she dropped near her seat when she sat down. He pulled it toward him and settled it on the floor beside his own gear. When the helicopter landed, he carried it for her. He took the heavier end of the litter. When they transferred the casualties to the medical team, he didn't complain. He didn't make a show of it. He just did it. And in that silence, Lena understood. The forest had delivered its verdict. The equipment that failed had failed. The equipment that worked had worked. The shots that needed to be taken had been taken. And the men who had laughed at her rifle weren't laughing anymore. Not because they'd been proven wrong. Because they'd learned something. In conditions where everything fails, where batteries die and scopes fog and digital readouts flicker and freeze, the thing that survives is the thing that was built to survive. The reliable thing. The simple thing. The thing that doesn't depend on anything but the hands that hold it. And the person who carries that thing? The person who understood, from the beginning, what mattered and what didn't. That person survives too. Lena pulled a claw from her vest pocket and began to wipe down the rifle. The metal was cold but clean. The scope cap was closed. The bolt moved smoothly through its action, the same way it had moved for 15 years. Her fingers brushed across the name etched into the metal. Grace. She didn't hear Grace's voice. She didn't feel Grace's presence. She didn't need to. The rifle was enough. The memory was enough. The lesson, to listen, to wait, to trust what she knew instead of what she was told, was enough. Lena let her shoulders drop a fraction. The tension that had been coiled inside her for 15 hours began, slowly, to unwind. The helicopter's engines quieted as the pilots shut down. Morning light poured through the open cargo door, golden and warm. The first real warmth she'd felt since they'd stepped off 18 hours ago. The unit filed out one by one. Rook first, carrying her pack. Then Walsh, his eyes still closed inside his own head. Then Briggs, then Diaz, then the others. Keller paused at the door and looked back. Carter. She looked up. That rifle of yours. He paused. The transition order from command? I'm going to recommend an exception. Permanent. Lena said nothing. Keller nodded once, then stepped off the helicopter. Lena sat alone in the cargo bay for another moment. The rifle quiet across her knees, the name Grace catching the morning light. Then she closed the scope cap, secured the rifle across her back, and walked into the sun. The mockery had stopped. By morning, no one was laughing. And in the silence that followed, the only sound that mattered was the one that had been there all along. A 15-year-old bolt action, functioning exactly as it was designed to function, in the hands of someone who knew what it meant to carry something that couldn't be replaced. The forest had spoken, and Lena Carter had listened.